When my son told me I wasn't expected for Christmas, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him, standing in the doorway of the house I was paying for, a stranger wearing my boy's face, and said a single word: understood. Then I turned around, walked back to my old Ford F-150, and by the time I'd merged onto the interstate, the call that would detonate the foundations of his carefully curated life had already been made. But let me back up. My name is Samuel Pierce. 78 years on this earth, 34 of them spent in the service of the United States Army. 2 tours in Desert Storm, 1 in Bosnia, and more classified deployments to dusty, forgotten corners of the world than I care to remember. I'm a black man, a veteran, a widower, and until that frigid December morning, I thought I was still a father. I'd driven 63 miles from my small, quiet house in the foothills in North Carolina to the sprawling, manicured suburbs of Charlotte. It's not a short trip, especially when the winter rains have left a treacherous sheen of black ice on the back roads and my truck's heater fights a losing battle against the cold. But David, my son, had called 3 days prior, his voice full of a warmth I hadn't heard in years, asking if I could come help him string up Christmas lights around the garage. "Just need a ladder and your steady hands, Dad," he'd said. It sounded like he wanted to spend time together. It sounded like family. It sounded like a lie, but I was so starved for the truth that I chose to believe it. I should have known better. When I pulled up to the house, the one with the address I'd long ago memorized because it was tied directly to my bank account, David met me at the door. He didn't invite me in. He didn't offer coffee against the biting cold. He just stood there, a sentinel guarding a life I was no longer a part of, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his designer jeans like a teenager caught in a lie. "I'm just gonna say this straight, Dad." He shifted his weight, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my left shoulder, unable to meet my gaze. "This year, you're not expected for Christmas." Expected. Not invited. Not wanted. Expected. Like I was a package delivery that had been rescheduled, an appointment that could be summarily canceled. The word was clinical, detached. It was a word you use for a service, not a father. I looked past him, through the open door into the warmth and light of the house. Ashley, his wife, glided through the cavernous kitchen, a white woman with honey-brown hair pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. She wore a designer apron that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. She glanced toward the door. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and then she looked away. Too fast. "Something I said?" I asked, keeping my voice level. The Army teaches you that. You never raise your voice in a firefight. You stay calm when the world is dissolving into chaos around you. "It's not about parents are flying in from Boston this year. Richard and Patricia Mitchell. They have traditions, their own way of doing things." Traditions. I nodded slowly, the single word a lead weight in my gut. I knew what kind of traditions they had. I'd met Richard and Patricia Mitchell exactly once at the wedding. They'd flown in, stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, and exuded an air of polite, condescending disappointment that their daughter was marrying a black man, even one with a good job and a respectable family name. I remembered Richard's handshake, limp and brief. I remembered Patricia's brittle smile and her endless talk about their home on Beacon Hill, their summers on Nantucket, their membership at a country club where I knew, without having to ask, that I would not be welcome. "Maybe we can do something the day after," David added quickly, a clumsy attempt to patch the wound he had just inflicted. "Brunch or whatever." Brunch. I'd navigated 63 miles of icy roads and wrestled a 40-foot extension ladder into the bed of my truck for the promise of brunch. But what truly broke something inside me, what made the air in my lungs feel thin and cold, was what I could see through that doorway, past David's anxious posture, past Ashley, who was now pretending to be absorbed in wiping down an already immaculate countertop. I could see their fireplace, the mantel artfully decorated with tasteful, minimalist stockings. And right there on the hearth, Lined up as neat as soldiers on parade were the tactical boots I had ordered for Leo, my grandson, 8 years old. Last summer, he had spent a week with me, and he told me with a fierce, burning seriousness that he wanted to be just like Grandpa. He wanted to wear boots like mine. Those boots had cost me $140 I didn't really have. I'd had them shipped express to ensure he'd have them before the winter cold set in. And there they sat, in the house I was paying for, a gift for the grandson I was now not expected to see on Christmas Day. I didn't say any of that. I didn't need to. The silence was its own closing argument. Understood, I said again. Then I turned, walked back to my truck, and didn't look back. The old engine turned over on the second try, a familiar, reassuring rumble. I let it warm for 30 seconds, watching in the rearview mirror as David closed the front door, shutting me out. I looked at the house, the manicured yard, the 3-car garage, the house I'd put $30,000 down on 5 years ago when David's credit was in ruins, the house for which I had been paying $1,875 every month like clockwork. I pulled out my phone as I reached the stop sign at the end of his pristine tree-lined street. I called the bank before I even hit the main road. The woman who answered had that professionally warm, disembodied voice they train into customer service representatives. "Mr. Pierce, how can we help you today?" "I need to cancel a standing payment," I said, my voice as steady as the rumble of the F-150's engine. "Certainly. May I have the account number?" I rattled it off from memory. You remember numbers that leave your account every month for 5 years straight. They burn themselves into your brain. "Let me just pull that up." A pause, the distant clicking of a keyboard. "Recurring mortgage payment to First National Bank of the Carolinas, $1,875 monthly. Is that correct?"
That's the one. And would you like this payment paused temporarily or canceled entirely? I looked out at the gray sky. A light, miserable drizzle had begun to fall. Eleanor, my wife, gone 3 years now, used to say that a cold rain in December was just God weeping for all the lonely people in the world. I still heard her voice sometimes, a quiet echo in the empty spaces of my life, especially when I was about to make a decision she'd have an opinion about. "Canceled," I said, effective immediately. Another pause, this one longer, filled with unspoken questions. "I understand, sir. That's been processed. Is there anything else we can assist you with today?" "No, ma'am," I said. "That's everything." I hung up and drove the rest of the way home in a profound, unbroken silence. Before we continue, I have a question. For all of you, have you ever reached a point where you had to choose between your own self-respect and a relationship with someone you love? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that a person's dignity is non-negotiable, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You're in good company here. 5 years ago, David had called me on a Tuesday night. His voice had that tremor in it, the one I recognized from his childhood, the one that meant he'd been crying but was trying desperately to hide it. "Dad, I got an opportunity, a VA-backed loan. We could actually buy a house. But my credit, it's shot from the hospital bills." The hospital bills. That's where this whole slow-motion train wreck had really begun. David had been in a car accident 2 years before that phone call. It wasn't his fault. Some kid, texting and driving, had blown through a red light and T-boned his sedan on the passenger side. 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, 5 agonizing days in the ICU. The other driver's insurance had covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Medical debt in this country is a predator. It will stalk you, corner you, and bury you alive, especially when you're young and just starting a family. David's credit score had plummeted from a respectable 720 to a dismal 540 in 6 months. Every mortgage application he and Ashley submitted came back stamped with a hard, unforgiving denied. They were stuck in a cramped, two-bedroom duplex, paying $1,300 a month in rent to a landlord who treated every request for repairs as a personal insult. I'd been over there in the dead of winter. You could see your breath in the kitchen. "Can you help?" David had asked that night, his voice thick with a mixture of hope and shame. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think twice. "Of course," I said. "That's what fathers do." Eleanor had been gone 6 months by then. Cancer had taken her with a brutal, terrifying speed. One day she was complaining of a persistent fatigue. 4 months later, I was standing in a funeral home trying to choose a casket. The house felt cavernous without her, the silence of physical presence. David was all I had left to the family we had built together, a raft life in the lonely ocean of my grief. So I co-signed. I put down $30,000 from the pension fund Eleanor and I had so carefully nurtured for our old age. I leveraged my pristine credit, my decades of financial discipline, to get them a 3.5% interest rate. I sat beside them at the closing, a silent, reassuring presence. I watched them get the keys. I watched Ashley cry happy, theatrical tears and hug her parents over FaceTime. Eleanor was never so sure about Ashley. We'd been laying in bed one night, about a month before the wedding. Eleanor had been sick by then, though we didn't yet know the full, terrifying scope of it. She turned to me in the dark, her voice a soft, tired whisper. "Sam, I need to tell you something about that girl, Ashley." "What about her?" I asked, already defensive on my son's behalf. "She sees your color before she sees your character," Eleanor had said, the words a quiet, painful truth. I tried to argue. I told her she was being unfair, that Ashley was young, that she'd grow, that David loved her, and that was all that mattered. Eleanor had just squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I hope you're right, baby. I really do. But I've been a black woman in this world for 58 years. I know how some white folks look at us when they think we're not paying attention." I dismissed it then. I told myself she was just being protective, that maybe the illness was making her see shadows where there were none. But Eleanor was right about most things in our 37 years together. It turned out this was one of them. I pulled into my own driveway around 11:30 that morning. The house looked smaller every time I came back to it. A modest two-bedroom ranch at the edge of town, the paint peeling on the north side where the wind hits hardest. The roof needed patching, had needed it for 2 years, but every time I managed to save up a little money to get it fixed, something would come up. David's furnace would break. Leo would need new school supplies. Ashley's car would need new tires. Always something. I sat in the truck for a long minute after killing the engine. My hand still gripping the wheel. The leather was cracked and worn under my palms. This old F-150 had 240,000 miles on it. I bought it used in 2006, paid cash. I had never missed a payment on anything in my life, not even when money was tight, not even when Eleanor was sick and the medical bills were piling up on our kitchen table like snowdrifts. That's what you do. You pay your debts. You keep your word. You take care of your family. I had thought that's what I was doing all these years. Inside, the house was cold. I turned the heat down to 55 before I left, trying to save on the propane bill. I hung my coat on the hook by the door, the same hook that had been there since Eleanor and I moved in back in 1994. 30 years in this house. We raised David here. I buried Eleanor from here. The kitchen table was my office. I kept my important papers in a plastic accordion folder, the kind you can buy for $3 at any office supply store. Inside was everything. Bank statements going back 5 years, printed emails, receipts for every repair I'd paid for on David and Ashley's house. The roof work after a hailstorm in 2021. the new water heater in 2022, the new kitchen appliances when theirs broke down 3 months after they moved in, the time I paid their heating bill when the furnace broke in the middle of January and they didn't have the cash, $600. The Christmas tree I brought them the first year after Eleanor died because they couldn't afford one, $150. I kept writing, I kept adding. The numbers climbed higher than I had realized, higher than I had allowed myself to realize, maybe. When I finally reached the bottom of the page, the total sat there staring back at me in my own handwriting. $161,825. I set the pen down. I looked at that number for a long, long time. Then I looked at my own bank statement, the one for my personal account, the checking account that held my pension and my Social Security. After the automatic mortgage payment for David's house went through each month, after I paid my own bills, I usually had about $200 left over, sometimes less. $200 a month for a man who served his country for 34 years. I picked up the calculator and did the math one more time just to be sure. Without that mortgage payment, I'd have just over $2,000 left over after my own expenses. For the first time in 5 years, my budget would actually balance. For the first time in 5 years, I could fix my own roof, buy new tires for my own truck, maybe even get the heater repaired before the real winter set in. For the first time in 5 years, I could breathe. I didn't eat dinner that night. I wasn't hungry. Instead, I made a pot of coffee and sat at that kitchen table with the papers still spread out in front of me. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. My phone sat face up next to the legal pad, waiting. It buzzed at 9:43. A text message from Ashley. Samuel, David said you canceled the transfer. I'm assuming this is temporary. Can we talk? I read it 3 times, searching for something that wasn't there. No greeting, no dad, even though she'd called me that for 7 years, no apology, no acknowledgement that maybe they had done something wrong. Just an assumption that this was temporary, that I would come crawling back, that the money would flow again once we had our little talk, and I understood how things really were. I picked up the phone and typed out a single word. No. I hit send, then I set the phone back down and waited. The thing about the Army is that it teaches you patience. It teaches you that sometimes the best move is no move at all. You set your position, you wait. You let the enemy show their hand first. I had learned that in my first tour, watching a desolate desert road for 16 hours.
Yes, and you've been making the payments every month for 5 years. Plus repairs, plus emergencies, plus whatever else they needed. She went back to reading, pulling out her phone to take pictures of the documents. Finally, she set the folder down. This isn't what Patricia Mitchell told me at all. No, I said. I imagine it's not. The article went live Thursday morning. The headline read, "The Forgotten Contributor, A Veteran's Lonely Christmas." Sarah had written it straight, no melodrama, just facts. A 78-year-old veteran, a son he'd helped for years, a mortgage he'd co-signed and paid, a Christmas invitation that never came, a family who had taken his money but not his presence. She didn't use their names, but anyone in Charlotte who knew them would connect the dots. She included screenshots of Ashley's social media posts, the one about everything we have we earned together, the one about her blessed life. And then she laid out the numbers, the down payment, 5 years of mortgage payments, the pattern of exclusion. By lunchtime, the comment section had exploded. God bless this veteran. My father went through the same thing. This breaks my heart. Then someone connected the dots publicly. Ashley Mitchell, still posting about her humble holiday while living in a house funded by her black father-in-law. The audacity. That comment got 247 likes. The story started getting shared. Local TV news picked it up. By 3 p.m., a TikTok about it had 50,000 views. My phone started ringing at 4:12. David. I sent it to voicemail. 4:15. Ashley. Voicemail. 4:23. The Boston area code. I decided I wanted to hear this one. I answered. The voice was male, clipped, angry. Mr. Pierce, this is Richard Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell? You need to retract that article. I didn't write it. You gave her the information. You made this public. I gave her the truth. There's a difference. His voice got colder. You're embarrassing my family. Then maybe your family should try less embarrassing behavior. I could hear him breathing hard, trying to control his temper. This will have consequences, he said. I almost laughed. Mr. Mitchell, I'm 78 years old. I've watched men die in the desert. I've buried a wife. You think I'm afraid of consequences from a banker in Boston? You're playing a dangerous game, old man. No, Richard, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm just finally keeping score. And the scoreboard just went public. You all spent years trying to erase me quietly. Now everyone gets to see what that erasure cost. He sputtered, started to say something else. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone completely, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table, reading through the comments again. For the first time in 5 years, strangers were seeing me, not as the problem, not as the inconvenience, as the man who had been wronged. That conversation with Richard wasn't the end. He tried to intimidate me with lawyers talking about implied contracts. He didn't know I'd already seen my own attorney, a sharp woman named Susan Baxter, who had already drafted a letter formally notifying David and Ashley that all financial support was voluntary and permanently discontinued. When I called him back and informed him that my attorney had prepared a countersuit for unjust enrichment and elder financial abuse, the line went very quiet. Next week, I told him, the Observer is running a follow-up with names this time. I hung up. Saturday afternoon, I drove past their house. The for sale sign was already up. Big, professional, from one of those fancy real estate companies. The yard, usually a riot of Christmas decorations, was bare. The windows were dark. I slowed, but didn't stop. The house I'd helped them buy, the house I'd paid for, was now up for sale because they couldn't afford it without me. I felt something then. Not satisfaction, something colder. Something like watching a building you'd shored up for years finally collapse after you'd pulled away the supports. That night, an email came through from David. Subject, I'm sorry. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. Dad, I don't know how we got here. I don't know when I stopped seeing you and started seeing what Ashley's parents wanted me to see. I don't know how to fix this. But I miss you. So does Leo. He asks about you every day. Attached was a photo, me holding Leo when he was 3, wearing my old army cap. Below the photo, in Leo's wobbly crayon handwriting, I love you, Grandpa. Merry Christmas, Leo. I stared at that photo for a long time, at Leo's face, at my own, younger and happier. And I cried. 2 quiet tears, one for the boy I'd raised, one for the man he'd become. I saved the email, but I didn't reply. Not yet. He needed to sit in the silence he had built. He needed to feel what it was like to reach out and get nothing back. I'd spent 5 years doing that. Now it was his turn. December 24th, Christmas Eve. I sat in my truck across the street from their house. Engine off. They were having a party. Through the front window I could see them. 12 guests, if the cars parked along the street were an indication. Mercedes, BMW, a Lexus. The refined tradition I wasn't expected to attend. On the passenger seat beside me sat my old leather briefcase. Tonight it carried 12 identical manila folders. Each one contained the documentation, the bank statements, the receipts, a copy of the article from the Observer, screenshots of Ashley's social media posts, the one about everything we have we earned together, the one about her blessed life. And then she laid out the numbers, the down payment, 5 years of mortgage payments, the pattern of exclusion. I walked up their driveway, past the perfect wreaths. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. I let myself in. The warmth hit first, then the smell of money and comfort and a Christmas that had no room for me. Then the silence. The exact moment a room full of people realizes something has shifted. 12 faces turned toward the door as one. I stood there in the entryway, briefcase in hand. "I won't stay long," I said, my voice carrying in the quiet room. But since I wasn't expected for dinner, I figured I'd at least drop off a few gifts. I moved around the table, slow, deliberate, placing a folder in front of each guest. Some opened them immediately. Some just stared. Patricia Mitchell, Lauren's mother, opened hers right away. I watched her eyes scan the first page, the bank statement. I watched her face change. "George," Ashley was standing now, her voice shaking, "you came here to humiliate us." "No," I said quietly. "I came to correct the record." A man in the middle of the table had his folder open. "These documents say you paid the mortgage for this house every month for 5 years. The room went silent to a low buzz of whispers, people flipping through pages, exchanging glances. Patricia Mitchell stood. "This is wildly inappropriate," she said, her voice clipped and certain. "You're disrupting a family gathering." "That's interesting," I said, "since I was told I wasn't family anymore." The words landed. I could see them land. I turned to my son. "I'm not angry at you," I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm disappointed. You had a father who would have given you everything, who did give you everything, and you traded that for candlelight and white linen with people who never lifted a finger for you." A man at the far end of the table closed his folder and looked directly at me. "Thank you for your service, sir." Just those words, but they carried weight, acknowledgement, respect. I picked up my empty briefcase. "I won't be seeing you again," I said, directed at David and Ashley. "But I hope one day you'll see yourselves." I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door, just closed it softly behind me. Just done. I drove home through the snow. My phone buzzed. A text from a